So I've been talking about this for quite a while now, but I finally have what I think is my favorite cinema rig for the Sony FX30. So we're going to be taking all the pieces on the table that we have here in front of me, which actually for a lot of cinema rigs isn't that much stuff, and building it all the way up into something a little more substantial, like this. It's taken me quite a while to sort of put all of this together. I've gone through many different iterations of this rig, but I think this is my favorite one. It's pretty simple, it's not super expensive, and it does everything that I need it to. So first things first, the camera body itself. Now the FX30 is a great little camera. It does a really good job of basically anything that I've tried to throw at it, and I have the small rig cage attached to this one. Now I'm not actually going to be using the XLR handle for this rig. Using the XLR handle on a rig is pretty challenging. It's a pretty hard thing to rig up. It really takes up the main space that you would want to add a monitor. So I'm not going to be using that. Most of the time when it comes to audio, I tend to record separately, but I'm going to give you a couple of options if you don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is, where normally you have the XLR handle, we're going to take the little NATO rail that comes with the small rig cage, and we're going to have that attached to the camera. So once you have the cage attached, you end up with this, which is a good little starting point. And the nice thing about this cage in general is you can kind of add anything you want to. It's got a whole lot of really great mounting points. It just does a really good job. Now on the bottom of this cage, it actually has an Arca Swiss plate, and we're going to be using that to basically be able to quickly detach and reattach this whole camera from the main rig itself. To do that, we're going to need an Arca Swiss quick release clamp. I'm going to use this one from Small Rig. The reason I like this one is it has a lot of mounting holes, so meaning you can attach it with 2 screws. Attaching it with 2 screws is really handy because it just means it's not going to move around quite as much. Now as for the base plate, and we're not actually going to be using a 15mm rail base plate like that most people would typically use. We're actually going to use this, which is just a Manfrotto quick release plate. I think it's by like Nicey Rig or something. I can't exactly remember. Everything is going to be linked down below. You can check those out. Those are affiliate links, so if you do purchase through those, big thank you. It helps support the channel, helps fund this sort of thing. But it's basically just a quick release plate for a Manfrotto style plate, which is the majority of plates that are used on tripods, gimbals, stuff like that. So this one I like because it's really small, but it also has this other plate that it comes with, which has loads of little mounting holes all over the plate itself. You can see here, especially on the end, here, it's got these holes on the front of the quick release plate. We're going to be using those to attach a 15mm rail mount to the quick release plate. We're going to come back to that in a second. So in the quick release plate that comes with this Manfrotto style one, I have 3 screws. One thing you're going to want to pick up before you build any rig realistically is just a whole bunch of 1/4-20 and 3/8 screws. I have just like a ton of them here. I've got a little tray of like loads and loads and loads of these little screws, different lengths, different styles, different sized attachment points. They just come incredibly handy for rigging up anything. And in the Manfrotto plate, we're going to use 3 screws. We're going to use 1 3/8 screw and 2 1/4-20 screws. We're going to use those to attach 2 different things to this plate. First off, we're going to attach our Arca Swiss quick release plate. So on the bottom of the quick release plate, you can see that there's a whole bunch of mounting points here. This one in the middle is a 3/8 and this one is a 1/4-20. We're going to use those to attach onto the very front of this quick release plate. And that's going to look a little something like this. Now it does overhang the front a little bit, you can kind of see there. It overhangs a little bit on the front, but we still have this one screw on the end that we're going to use for our V-mount plate. V-mount plates was actually the thing that I found most difficult for this whole rig. There's a lot of really great ones out there, but there aren't very many affordable options. So what I ended up doing was I put this together. Now this is a really cheap little V-mount plate that I picked up off of eBay, and I just attached it to a cheese plate on the back. Now this cheese plate in particular is actually from the Canon C200 top plate, and they don't make this anymore. So you're gonna have to find this one on eBay. If I can find the part number, I'll put that down below. But C200 top plate is what this is, and then I attached this V-mount plate to that. Now the reason I love this V-mount plate so much is because it has an on and off switch on the side. This little switch, it just powers and turns off this singular D-tap port on the side, and that is basically perfect for this whole rig because we're going to be using that one D-tap port to power everything in our camera. Now when I purchased this plate, it actually came like this. So it arrived like this. It had the V-mount plate on one side, and on the back it had like a clamp Now this gets into a teeny tiny bit of DIY type of stuff. You're gonna have to take this apart a little bit and attach it to a cheese plate. Now again, if you cannot find the C200 cheese plate, I have an alternative here that works just as well. So I'm gonna build this again using these other parts. This cheese plate you can buy on Amazon and it's fantastic. So on the front of this V-mount plate, there's loads of different types of these that come with like a belt clip or a clamp or loads of other different things. And the main thing is on the front of this, it has 4 little screws around the edge, and that basically holds the frame together. So the first thing you're going to do is just undo those 4 screws, and that's going to separate the V-lock plate from the back plate that it is attached to. So once that's loosened up, you can just remove this. So you have the V-mount plate itself, and with all of the cables attached in the back, and you're left with this small little plate that it comes attached to. At that point, what you want to do is just remove the clamp section from this plate with these 2 little screws. Get those 2 parts separated. We're not going to be using this anymore, so you can set that over to the side, and you're left with this little plate which attaches the V-lock section to. So this big hole in the middle is going to be your best friend. You want to use this to attach it to the cheese plate. So again, taking either your C200 cheese plate or this one that you can find on Amazon, you're going to take this little plate, and this hole in the middle, this large one, is going to go into the very center hole of this cheese plate here. Same on the C200, you just want to find one right in the middle. You're going to line this up where it's nice and centered, and then you're going to take one of your 1/4-20 screws and you're just going to screw it right through there and have these 2 plates attached. Again, you're going to need to buy a pack of screws to be able to have these, and just get that attached there. Now you're going to want to make sure that you've attached that screw really tight because you only have the 1 screw on here. If it's not tight enough, it's going to sort of swivel. But you end up with those 2 pieces attached. You got your cheese plate on one side and your little attachment plate on the back. And then you're going to take your V-mount section and then reattach it straight back onto its original back plate. Just reattaching with those 4 original screws that we released earlier. And there you are, you've got your little V-mount plate that has your cheese plate on the other side. Now the main thing you're going to need to be aware of with these cheese plates is that both of them, whether you're using the C200 one or the other one that you can get on Amazon, is they have screw holes on the bottom. So you're going to want to make sure that whichever cheese plate that you've gone with is that the screw holes are on the bottom, not on the top, because we're going to be attaching it from the bottom. I'm going to go with the C200 plate because I just prefer the way that it looks, but this is going to work with either of these. So we're going to go back to our little Manfrotto style quick release plate, and this 1 screw that we have left we're going to use to attach to the very center hole of the cheese plate. So right here you're going to make this little sort of L shape plate right there. And again, we've only got 1 screw here, unfortunately, so you just want to make sure that you get that super, super tight so it's not going to be swiveling around. Most of the time, I actually like to have these flush, where, you know, there's no gap between the cheese, like the V-mount plate and the quick release plate here. But the FX30 is quite a thick boy, right? It's quite a thick camera, especially with this screen and this fan section out the back. So we're going to need to leave a little bit of room so that the camera can actually fit in there, which is also going to leave us a little bit of a channel to run some of our cables later, which is very handy. So there you have it. You have this really nice little L-shaped mounting plate. One of the things you've noticed is it doesn't swivel back and forth. Small rig make that V-mount plate that enables you to have a hinge built into it, and I really like it, but the problem is that it doesn't have any electrical connections, and I really wanted to have the electrical connections built into the plate itself. That way, if you're swapping the battery, you're not having to plug the cables in. You know, every time you take the battery off, you're gonna have to detach all the cables, put it back in, reconnect the battery, and you're good to go. Whereas this is kind of nice because it's got a DTAP port built onto the plate itself, and that means that whenever you take the battery off, there's no cables on the battery, so you can just swap on and off batteries really quickly and really easily. But if you have one of those, go ahead and use that. It's basically the same idea, except it has the hinge system and no electronics. So it depends on what you want. If you'd rather have the hinge but no electronics, go with that piece. If you'd rather have the electronics but no hinge, then you can build something like this for pretty cheap. All right, so with this little V-mount plate here that we have now built, it's got that quick release on the bottom that came from this plate. So obviously we can just attach that to this plate whenever we want, which is very handy, and remove it whenever we want to. What we're gonna do for our 15mm rails is we're actually gonna add this small little rail mount that you can get. These are really cheap and really easy to use. And we're gonna attach it with 2 screws right onto the front of the quick release plate that came with the other part that we've already used. Now this is going to take 2 long screws. Now once you pick up your little packs of screws, we're going to need 2 long pieces. Now these screws need to be able to go through the whole way through these through holes on the front of this piece and come out the other side. So you're going to need relatively long screws for those. Take your quick release plate, and this is only going to line up on one side, so just play around until you find that. But on the front here, you have these little screws like that, and this is going to line up and screw in right there. Get these pieces screwed in here, and you have your 15mm rail mount, and it has a really low clearance now, which is nice because the rails are going to sit quite high compared to what a lot of other rail mounts have to offer. We're not going to need very long rails, so I just have these nice little 4-inch rails from SmallRig. Very, very simple. If you attach longer ones, you just run the risk of them sticking way out the front of the camera. But if you have a really long lens on the front of your camera, you're going to need a longer set of rails to be able to accommodate that. What we can do is we can take our 15mm rails, slide those in, get those nice and evenly lined up, and there you have it. So now we have a little 15mm rail quick release plate. So if we want to use 15mm rails, we have this ready to go. So all we have to do is take this little 15mm base plate that we've put together and add a tripod plate to the bottom of this. Whatever tripod you use, just attach that tripod's quick release plate straight to the bottom. If you're using something different than the Manfrotto style one, just use whatever you have. Attach that to the bottom of this, and here you have a nice little 15mm rail base plate that you can use. So if you're wanting to use the rails, like let's say you're adding a lens support or a follow focus on here, then you have this ready to go. If you're not using it, then you don't need this. You can set it to the side because this actually has the same thing. It's got the same quick release plate on the bottom, but if you do want to use the rails, all you have to do is slide this on and lock it down, and there you have your rails attached and connected and ready to go. Now if you're using autofocus lenses, you don't need a motor or you don't need a lens support, then you can detach this and you just use this piece on its own. So again, this cage that we put on our FX30 earlier has this Arca Swiss plate on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and fold out the screen because we're going to need to have access to that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to loosen up the Arca Swiss quick release plate and slide the camera directly on there. Lock that down, and the camera is now attached to this little V-mount plate. Now on the back here, a lot of people always get concerned that there's not going to be access to the buttons. This leaves plenty of space for all the buttons on the side, and on the top here, you're going to have access to your menu and your mode button right in there. There's not a huge amount of clearance. If you've got super chunky fingers, you might want to just play around with the clearance of the Arca Swiss quick release plate and this little back plate. Just move those around, get them as far apart as you can, gives you a little bit more clearance. But I think it fits and looks really nice. It almost looks like it's just sort of built into the back of the camera. It's very, very clean and works really well. Now the V-mount that I'm actually going to be using is this. This is the classic, right? The classic CameTV V-mount battery. I think they're like $160 brand new. These things have existed for a long, long time, and I've ended up going back to them. So, I've got a lot of really nice smart V-mount batteries at the moment, like the SmallRig 99 Watt Pro. Just does everything for you. It's fantastic. But the thing I love about this one is it's so small, right? So not just small like depth wise, but also height, which makes a big difference for whenever you're attaching a top handle, because sometimes it doesn't give you enough clearance to remove the battery. This one is just such a small little battery. Also, loads of people have these already. So if you already have this, you don't need to go out and buy something new. Keep using this. And then we just go ahead, we attach this onto the back, and it is just a really nice fit. You can see here that the screen lines up perfectly with the edge of the battery, and it just fits super, super well. It just feels right. This is all just sort of lined up nicely, which I love. So other than the top handle and the monitor, which we're going to come to in a second, this is the first sort of piece. Now again, if you're using autofocus lenses, you don't need rails necessarily. You might want a lens support if you've got a really big lens, but most of the time you're not going to need sort of 15mm rails in the bottom. The autofocus on this camera is so good that I don't think you need to use manual focus lenses unless there's certain characteristics and qualities of those lenses that you're wanting to go for. And if that's the case and you want to add a follow focus or a lens support or anything like that, you've got your little quick release plate here. You just slide this on, lock it down, and there you have that whole setup. ready to go. So before we get any further, let's go ahead and we'll attach our lens. I'm actually going to use this one. This is, I don't have a lens cap on here, but that's just to show you how beautiful this front element is of this lens. This is the new Sirui 75mm f1.2. It's a lens I've been testing out for the last little while, and it's beautiful. I really love the look that it gives. It's a strange one to use for video. I understand like 75mm on APS-C is not a very common video look, but it's something I've been playing around with just a little bit more, getting that super zoomed in, super compressed image style, and I think it looks great. It's also a good looking lens, and it's just one I'm testing at the moment. But the thing about this rig, and most rigs in general, is this is going to work with any lens that you have. Basically every and any lens is going to work on this rig, so I'm just going to use this one because it's the one that I'm testing out at the moment. And this one has a lens hood. Real quick, we're going to talk about matte boxes for a second. You could attach a matte box to the front of this rig, and I have one here set to the side that we're going to give a bit of a go later, but a matte box and a lens hood are actually going to do very similar things if you're not attaching, different filters to the front of your matte box. So if you're not using filters on your rig, a matte box isn't super necessary if your lens already comes with a lens hood. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and attach this lens hood. And here we have a pretty cool looking rig already. I think this is looking kind of nice. All we got to do is attach our handles, our monitor, and then our cables. My favorite top handle is this by Nicey Rig. I think it's Nicey Rig, but it's a little NATO rail handle. It's pretty low profile. It's really easy to use, and I just like it. And also this cage has a built-in NATO rail on the top, so this handle just works really well for just sliding it on and off, and you can crank it down. It works with every single NATO rail because the NATO attachment on this can actually loosen or tighten infinitely. Some other NATO rails have like a clamp system, and then it doesn't actually work with every NATO rail, which is really annoying. So this one has worked with every single NATO rail that I've ever tried it on, so that's why I like it. I'm going to set this to the side real quick, and we're going to build our top handle setup. So with our little top handle, what we're going to do is this big 3/8 screw on the front. We're going to attach a cold shoe for our monitor. So it's very simple. This cold shoe in particular has area locating pins on the back, and this screw has area locating pins on it too. So it's very easy to just attach that with one single screw, and it's not going to be going anywhere. It doesn't like budge or wiggle around. And there we go. So the monitor that we're going to be using is this one by Portkeys. This is the LH7P, which is a 7-inch monitor, but it does a couple of fantastic things. First off, it's 7 inches, but it doesn't feel huge. There's very little bevel space, meaning that the monitor is very compact for the size of the screen that it has, which is great. And it comes with a few accessories. Mainly it comes with a little monitor mount, and this one is a little cold shoe monitor mount, which is why we're using that little cold shoe adapter. So first off, we're gonna take our monitor mount, attach it to the handle, and that sits like that. Very nice low profile little monitor mount. Then we're gonna take our monitor, the LH7P, and it's got a little screw on the bottom there with some area locating pin connectors, and get that attached here. And there we have it. We got a nice little top handle and monitor setup just like this. So we can go ahead and attach that to the top of the camera. Here we have a really cool looking rig already, and it's looking really good. All right, so next I'm going to set this over to the side, and we're going to talk about cables. So for cables, there are 3 specific cables that we're going to need, which is an HDMI cable and 2 power cables. We're going to power the camera and the monitor, and then run the HDMI from the camera to the monitor. So that's 3 cables. And here I have them all intertwined and all interconnected for a specific purpose. So what we're going to use is a DTAP to NPF dummy battery. Now this dummy battery has a DC port in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a DC to a Sony Z100 dummy battery connected from here into the camera. Now one thing I'm going to say is I haven't given this a crazy amount of testing. I've used this rig for a couple of shoots and it hasn't given me any problems. I don't think this is maybe the smartest or best way to run this, so please do this at your own risk. I haven't tried this. I don't know enough about voltages and how all that kind of stuff works to know that this is actually safe or okay to use. I haven't had any problems with it so far. That doesn't mean that it's the best way to do it, but just giving you that heads up. Other people in the comments down below will certainly let you know. But the DTAP is going to run from the battery plate straight into the monitor, and then it's going out of this dummy battery from the DC port into the camera. So it's going to power both devices from one DTAP port. Alright, I have kind of bad news, which is that unfortunately something has changed. I was playing around with the rig, I've got the rig in front of me here, just messing about with it, and I just updated my camera, And for some reason, whatever was in the update, whatever changed with the update, I guess there's maybe a slightly different power draw of the FX30. I really don't know what's gone on, but that setup that I was using with the dummy battery for the camera coming out of the dummy battery for the monitor is no longer working. It's randomly powering off and restarting again. So it only seems to do it with a battery that is not 100% charged. If it's 100% charged, it's fine, but if it's lower than like 80%, it just switches off. So here's what I'm doing instead at the moment. So I have these little right angle USB to USB-C cables. You can also get them from USB-C to USB-C. It depends on the battery that you're using, but almost every battery these days has a little USB-C port, as you can kind of see here. I'm still running the dummy battery from the V-mount plate up to the monitor, just not to the camera. And instead what I'm doing is I'm running the USB out of this port here into the USB-C port in the camera, just like this. So the USB port is coming out of there and it is going into here. It's still very nice and neat. You can tuck the cable in pretty well. It works fine. It's not as good as what it was before. So here's what I'm going to do is, this is a great recommendation. I still think this works great. It's going to offer power delivery for the camera. It's working great. The only thing that I don't have anymore is that switch. So I've got a couple of things that I'm going to be trying. I just don't have time to wait until I get those parts. This video has a deadline, got to get it out really soon. But I'm going to try a couple of things. So what I encourage you to do, if you want to, do hit the subscribe button so that you can check out. I'm going to release an updated video in the next few weeks or maybe a couple of months. Once I really figure out another opportunity of how to power both of these things with one cable, maybe. I'm going to play around with a couple of things to see if I can come up with something cooler, but for now, USB-C power delivery works just fine. Most V-mount batteries have a USB port, so the only problem is you're just going to have to unplug it and plug it in. Not the end of the world, but not what I was hoping for. Anyway, back to the video. So we're going to attach the D-tap to the V-mount plate here that we have on the side. And now we have everything powered and connected through one D-tap port. There we have everything interconnected, all set up, ready to go. All you have to do is flick this little power button that's on the side of this V-mount plate, little power button here, and it'll turn on both devices, the monitor and the camera. Now, something to be aware of that a lot of people get very nervous about is frying the HDMI port of your camera when you're powering both the camera and the monitor from the same battery. So what often happens is whenever you flick this power switch, the battery sends electricity to the camera and the monitor simultaneously, sending a surge of electricity through your HDMI cable, potentially into your HDMI port of your camera, and could fry the camera. People get very worried about that, but it's actually very simple. All you have to do before turning on your camera or turning off your camera, unplug the HDMI cable from one end. And then whenever the energy gets sent through the HDMI port, if it does, it's not going anywhere, right? They're not interconnected. They're not going to be sending anything from the two. So all you have to do basically is just unplug your HDMI cable from one end. It doesn't matter which end, as far as I'm aware. Turn on your battery, send power to both devices, let them power up, and then reconnect the HDMI port, and you're good to go. Now, a couple of optional extras that you might want to add to this rig are going to be things like a matte box and side handles. So I've got a few suggestions for you. First off, for the side handles, I'm going to be using airy rosette mount. So it's basically this very simple, very easy rosette mount here, because the two handles that I like for this rig both use that mount. So we're going to take this little piece and we're going to attach it on the side of the camera cage right here. This little airy rosette mount is super cheap, which is nice, and then it also has 2 screws on it, which makes it very easy to attach to this cage. Now, one of my favorite handles recently has been this one by Condor Blue. It's their wing handle, I think it's called. It's just a really nice sort of pistol grip style handle with an airy rosette side handle. So that can just attach on here, and you're good to go. You got a really nice big side handle that's very comfortable, very easy to use, and also looks really good. I realize that that doesn't matter to a lot of people, but I like my rigs to look nice, and this is just a really nice handle for that. It's not very expensive. They make one that has like the ability to like start and stop recording with your camera, but we don't need that because our monitor can actually do that. That's one of my favorite things about this monitor, is it can control your camera wirelessly, just through Wi-Fi. You can send the signal from your FX30 to your camera. You can control the ISO, the aperture, the shutter speed, you can control focus, and you can start and stop recording all from the monitor. So even if you don't want to have to turn your camera to the side to access this screen here, you can do it all from this one main screen up here, which is fantastic. So this is the handle that I use if I'm using autofocus lenses. So again, we can just go ahead and detach this whole base plate because I'm not needing the rails right now. I'm not using anything that requires those rails. I'm just using the autofocus. This lens isn't too heavy, so I don't need a lens support and I don't need a focus motor. So, you know, at the moment, this is all that I need and it works great. I can attach it to my tripod with this built-in plate and we're ready to go. But let's say I'm wanting to use manual focus lenses, like maybe these cinema lenses that I have here, instead of autofocus. So go ahead and attach our manual focus lens. And now we're gonna need a follow focus to be able to attach to this focus ring. We're gonna need our 15mm rail base plate and a focus motor. I'm gonna be using this one by Tilta, the Tilta Nucleus Nano. The Mark II version is probably gonna work better for most people. I only have the Mark I here. So we're gonna go ahead and attach that onto the 15mm rail. Attach the camera back onto this base plate. And there we have that ready to go. And instead of this handle we were using, we're going to use this one, also by Tilta. This is their focus handle that they have for their focus motor. As you can see here, it's got this wheel that allows you to move the focus motor and control it from here. Now you can also control it from the monitor as far as I'm aware, but I don't think that's very useful. I much prefer using this handle. I know it's a little bit more expensive, but it is definitely a worthwhile investment if you're using a lot of manual focus lenses and you have the Tilta focus motor. So I got the Airy Rosette connection because again, it means that I don't need to have multiple different connectors. And there we go. Now this one sits out quite a bit farther. But if you're using manual focus lenses, this works great. You can use this just connect it by the USB cables directly to the motor and calibrate it, and you can run manual focus lenses all from the touch of a finger, which is really, really nice. But for me personally, I've kind of gotten back into using autofocus lenses a lot more because I think a lot of companies are starting to come out with better autofocus lenses that have a lot more character and unique style to them than we used to get in the past. They used to all be really clinical and sharp, which is fine for that use case. But for me, I like to have a little bit more personality and style to my shots. And these Sirui ones absolutely have that. Now, the other thing that you could do is add a matte box. So, I'm never going to say no to using a matte box. Matte boxes are great and it adds a lot of character to your rig. Now, the two I'm going to be recommending are the SmallRig Mini Matte Box. I think that's my favorite one. Recently though, I picked up this one by Tilta. I've just been trying out a bunch of Tilta stuff recently. And Tilta's Mini Matte Box is pretty nice. It's small and easy to use. The only problem with it, I found, is that the adapters don't really work very well with 82mm filters. You can still attach circular filters onto the front of the adapters, but it has a harder time with larger 82mm variable ND filters, stuff like that. But it's a nice little matte box. I think I personally would still stick with the SmallRig one. It's currently out being used on another camera at the moment, so I've got the Tilta one here instead. But here we have it, a cool looking rig, very modular. The whole camera can just pop out of this current setup. And if you want to use the rails, it's very simple. You can just slide that straight on there. And have a rail setup as well, ready to go if you wanted to attach other things to the rails. Really nice little modular system, very easy to use, very simple, and works great. Now, the last thing I get asked about all the time is audio. Where's your audio setup? Well, there's nothing going on here. Oftentimes with rigs, it's pretty challenging to be able to attach external microphones, like shotgun microphones. And for most of my use case, the way that I use cameras, a shotgun microphone is not actually going to do anything if it's on the camera. The quality is not going to be good enough. I almost always record externally to an external recorder. It's a safer bet. I've always preferred doing that. But if you do want to add a microphone, so what you could do is you could take another cold shoe adapter, because this uses a cold shoe, most of them do, and you could attach that back onto the top of this handle and you would attach it on here. Alternatively, what I think works a lot better would be to use something like this. This is one of those little wireless receivers. This is Hollyland's one. You've got the Rode Wireless Go 2s, you've got the DJI wireless mics, any of those sorts of wireless microphone setup kits, and this cage has a cold shoe attachment right on here. What you can do is just attach that onto here, onto the top, run that straight into the camera, and you've got some audio running straight in there. Or again, you could attach it on the front of this handle like that, wherever you kind of want to put it. Audio is pretty simple, and these little wireless kits are fantastic. But again, all of this, most of the time, if you're doing any professional work, is recording scratch audio, and you should be recording things separately. Now, this video is long enough as it is. I would love to go into more details about like this monitor, the handles, stuff like that. If you're interested, please let me know. I'd love to make more videos about each of these products, but I'm kind of out of time here today. But here we have it, the finished rig. I think it looks pretty cool. It's very sleek, very easy to use. It's not super heavy. Depending on the lens that you use, I would give you a rig weight, but every lens that you use is going to make this a different weight. So I don't know what you think. If you think this is a pretty cool rig, let me know in the comments down below. If you hate it, let me know that too. Drop a comment down below if you've enjoyed the video. Do hit a like button, maybe even subscribe as we continue to build this channel. I appreciate all of you for doing so, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.